My daughter-in-law sent me a text message. The plans changed. Mother-in-law, you're no longer going on the cruise. It's only for the 25 closest family members. I stood in silence. I just did what she never imagined. I canceled my son's credit cards and disappeared. Days later, when they returned from their family trip, no one could say a single word. Mother-in-law, I had the phone in my hand when the world stopped. A message. Just that was enough for 68 years of life to crumble like a sandcastle. The plans changed, mother-in-law. You're no longer going on the cruise. It's only for the 25 closest family members. I read those words once, twice, 3 times, hoping the letters would rearrange themselves, that they would say something different. But no. There they were, cold as steel, cutting like a knife in my stomach. Jane, my daughter-in-law. The woman who entered my family 15 years ago with a perfect smile and polite words. The same one who had just told me, without saying it, that I wasn't part of the closest ones. My hands were trembling holding the cell phone. I felt the air escaping my lungs. I felt the walls of my living room closing in on me. On the dining room table were the 2 suitcases I had packed with such excitement. Inside, the sky blue dress I bought especially for the gala dinner. The new shoes, the sunscreen, everything ready for the trip that I myself had paid for. $320,000, that Caribbean cruise that Jane had dreamed of since she was a child, that my son Scott begged me to finance because the family needs these moments. Mom, that I organized thinking that finally, after giving so much, I would be included, that I would be, for once, part of the circle. But there was the truth, bright and cruel on my phone screen. I wasn't close family. I was the wallet, the source of money, the old lady who signs checks and is then disposable. I remained sitting in that armchair where I had rocked my grandchildren so many times, where I embroidered tablecloths for their house, where I waited for calls that almost never came, and something inside me, something that had endured years of subtle slights and words poisoned with honey, finally broke. I didn't cry. Not yet. I just stayed there, in that heavy silence that smells of cold coffee and dead hopes, holding a phone that had just confirmed what I always knew deep down. To them, I was expendable. But what Jane didn't know, what none of them imagined, is that this quiet woman, this understanding mother-in-law who never made a fuss, had just made the most powerful decision of her life. I was going to disappear. And when they returned from their family trip, when they opened their wallets and checked their accounts, when they looked for the money they had gotten used to like breathing, no one, absolutely no one, would be able to say a single word. Because this time, I was the one who changed the plans. If you have ever felt invisible in your own family, if someone has made you feel that you are only useful when you give, stay until the end. This story is just beginning, and what I did next changed everything. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any confession like this one. To understand why that message crushed me so much, I need you to know how I ended up in that armchair, holding a phone that confirmed my worst nightmare. It all started 10 years ago, when I lost Robert. My husband died of a heart attack while pruning the rose bushes in the garden. He fell among the flowers he cared for so much, and I was left alone in a house that looked too big, too silent, too empty. Scott was my only son, my reason for living after Robert left. And when he showed up at my door 3 days after the funeral, with red eyes and a broken voice telling me, "Mom, I promise you will never be alone," I believed him. I wanted to believe him. Jane came into my life 6 months later. She was pretty, polite, with that smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. But Scott looked at her as if she were the sun, and I thought, if he is happy, I am happy. The wedding cost $450,000. I paid every cent. The venue, the banquet, the music, even the wedding dress that Jane chose in a boutique in Beverly Hills. "My family doesn't have the resources, Mom," Scott explained to me. "You understand, right?" I understood. I always understood. 2 years later, they needed an apartment. Scott worked in sales, but his salary barely covered the basics. "Mom, if we had our own asset, we could grow. Form a real family." $2,800,000. That's what the 3-bedroom apartment in a residential area cost. I put it in his name, of course. "So he has security," the notary told me. So my son has something of his own, I replied. Then came the business. A sports supplement store that Scott swore would be our financial salvation. $750,000 of initial investment. Inventory, premises, permits, everything. In 2 years, I'll return every last dollar, Mom. I swear it on my father. I never saw a cent back, but the grandchildren arrived, and with them, new hope. Matthew and Camille, my beautiful babies. I thought that with them, everything would change, that the family would unite, that I would have a new purpose. I bought them cribs, strollers, clothes, diapers. I paid for pediatricians, daycares, swimming lessons. Every birthday was a party that I financed. Every Christmas, I was the one who filled the tree with gifts. And the monthly allowance, $35,000 every month, religiously to help with expenses, so that Jane wouldn't have to work and could dedicate herself to the children, so that my son wouldn't feel the weight of responsibility. In 10 years, I calculated once. I invested more than $4,750,000 in them. And what did I get in return? 5-minute calls on Sundays? Obligatory visits on my birthday where Jane checked her phone every 10 seconds? Grandchildren who called me Grandma Opal with the same distance they would greet a neighbor. But I kept giving, because that's what mothers do, right? We give until there's nothing left. We love until we forget to love ourselves. Jane was never openly cruel. She was worse than that. She was courteous, correct, cold as marble. When I suggested something, she smiled. What a nice idea, mother-in-law, but I think we'll do it differently. When I arrived unannounced, her look said everything her mouth kept silent. What are you doing here? Scott became a stranger with my face. He justified everything. Well, Jane has her personality. You know how women are now, Mom. They're independent. She's tired with the kids. Her family is different, more reserved. There was always an excuse. I was always the one who had to understand, adapt, shut up. And I shut up. For years, swallowing every slight as if they were bitter but necessary pills. Until that message. Until they told me, without anesthesia, that after paying for a cruise of $320,000, I didn't deserve to be there, that I wasn't among the closest. And there, sitting in that armchair with my bags packed and my heart shattered, something woke up in me. Something that had been sleeping under years of submission and unrequited love. A cold, calculating, definitive rage. But before acting, I needed to understand one more thing. I needed to confirm if this was a mistake, a bad last-minute decision, or if that's really how they saw me. What I discovered 3 days later took away every last trace of doubt. 3 days before receiving that message, I still had hope. It was Thursday afternoon. I had gone to Scott's apartment to bring them a casserole of turkey and gravy that I had prepared. My mother-in-law's turkey and gravy. The recipe that Robert loved, the one I kept as a family treasure. I thought Jane would like it. I thought we could share something. I rang the doorbell twice. No one answered, but I heard voices inside. Laughter. I used the copy of the key that Scott had given me for emergencies, and I entered carefully, holding the hot casserole in my hands. Scott? Jane? It's me! I brought food! More laughter from the master bedroom, and then I heard it. Jane's voice, loud and clear, talking on the phone with the speaker activated. Oh, Mom, you don't know what a show I had to put on. The old lady wanted to come on the cruise as if she were our equal. Can you imagine? 7 days locked on a boat with her, following us everywhere, giving opinions nobody asked for. I froze in the living room. The casserole trembled in my hands. Her mother's voice answered from the speaker. And what did you tell her? We're going to tell her there's no space, that the cruise is only for the 25 closest. Technically, it's true, right? My family, Scott's family that actually matters, the kids, she doesn't fit into that category. Laughter. Both of them were laughing, as if they were talking about canceling a magazine subscription, not about excluding the woman who had paid every dollar of that trip. But what about the money? Jane's mother asked. She paid for everything, didn't she? Oh, Mom, please. That money is already spent. Besides, it's the least she can do after everything Scott puts up with. Do you think it's easy to have a mother-in-law like that? Always giving her opinion, always wanting to be in the middle of everything? I'll be rid of her soon enough. After the cruise, I'm going to convince Scott to set some serious boundaries, that she only visits when we invite her, that she understands her place. Every word was a dagger, but the next sentence killed me. Besides, we've already gotten everything we could from her. The apartment is in Scott's name. The business is already running. If she disappears tomorrow, she's already served her purpose. It sounds awful, but it's the truth. You're right, honey. She did her part. Now let her enjoy her old age all by herself, right? More laughter. I don't know how long I stood there, in that living room that I helped furnish, holding a casserole of turkey and gravy that suddenly weighed 1,000 pounds. My legs wouldn't respond. My heart was beating so hard I thought it would jump out of my chest. I placed the casserole on the dining room table carefully, as if it were made of glass. It didn't make a sound. I left the apartment walking backward, like a sleepwalker, and closed the door softly. I got home without remembering how I drove. I sat on the edge of my bed, the same one I shared with Robert for 30 years. And there, finally, I cried. It wasn't a soft cry. It was a violent, desperate cry, one of those that comes from the depths of the soul. I cried for the 10 lost years, for every dollar given with love and received with contempt, for every call I waited for and never came, for every feigned hug, every false smile, every "we love you, Mom," that was never true. I cried until there were no more tears left. And then, in that silence, broken only by my ragged breath, I took the photo of Robert that I always keep on my nightstand. I looked into his eyes, those brown eyes that always made me feel protected, loved, valuable. "Forgive me, my love," I whispered to the photograph. "Forgive me for allowing our son to become this, for not setting boundaries, for confusing love with submission." That night, I didn't sleep. I stayed awake, staring at the ceiling, feeling something inside me harden, like when clay turns into brick in the kiln. The next day, Scott called. "Mom, were you at the house yesterday? Jane found a casserole on the table." "Yes, son. I brought you some turkey and gravy." "Oh, that's sweet. Hey, about the cruise, there's a slight change of plans." And then the message arrived, the message that would confirm everything I had heard. But this time, when I read those cold words, when I saw that my son didn't even have the courage to tell me himself, something strange happened. I no longer felt pain. I felt clarity. A cold, sharp, perfect clarity like a diamond, because I finally understood something I should have understood years ago. The love that is begged for is worthless. Respect that is pleaded for is a lie. And the family that only seeks you out when they need something is not family, it's a business. And I had just decided to close that business forever. After reading that message, I did something that surprised even myself. I didn't scream, I didn't cry, I didn't call Scott to complain, I didn't call Jane to tell her everything I thought. I simply replied, "I understand. Enjoy it." 5 words, nothing more. Jane replied in seconds, "Thank you for understanding, mother-in-law. I knew you would take it well. It's just that space is limited and we prefer it to be something more intimate." Intimate. 25 people was intimate. I didn't reply. I just left the phone on the table and stared at those open suitcases, full of clothes I would never wear on that boat. The sky blue dress seemed to mock me, hanging there as a reminder of my own naivete. Scott didn't call. Not that day nor the next. Not even a text message asking how I was. If I had been hurt, if I needed anything. Nothing. And that indifference, that icy silence, hurt me more than all of Jane's cruel words combined, because it confirmed what I already knew. I had raised a son who saw me as a formality, as something that is resolved with a text message, and that's it. For 3 days, I locked myself in my house. I didn't answer the phone. I didn't open the curtains. I barely ate. I stayed sitting in the gloom, surrounded by photographs of a family that no longer existed, or maybe never existed. Matthew as a baby in my arms, Camille blowing out the candles on her 3rd birthday, Scott graduating from college, hugging me, telling me, "I did it for you, Mom." Lies. Everything was lies wrapped in photo paper. On the 3rd day, there was a knock at my door. It was Laura, my neighbor. My only true friend in this world, that had become so lonely. "Opal, open up. I know you're in there." I didn't want to see her. I didn't want anyone to see me like this, broken, defeated, finished. But Laura is persistent. She kept knocking until I had no choice but to open. She looked at me up and down, my wrinkled robe, my uncombed hair, my eyes swollen from crying so much. She didn't say anything. She just walked in, closed the door, and hugged me. And there, in the arms of a woman who didn't share my blood, but did share my pain, I cried again. I told her everything. The message, the conversation I overheard, the 10 years of giving without receiving, the millions of dollars invested in a family that saw me as an ATM, the cruise I paid for a trip I wasn't invited to. Laura listened to me in silence, holding my hands. When I finished, her eyes were full of tears, but her voice was firm as steel. "Until when, Opal? Until when are you going to let them use you like this?" "He's my son, Laura. He's the only thing I have left of Robert." "No," she told me, squeezing my hands. "Robert left you much more than an ungrateful son. He left you beautiful memories. He left you this house. He left you savings. And above all, he left you yourself. That strong woman I met 20 years ago, the one who built a business with her husband, the one who faced life without fear. Where is that Opal?" I remained silent because she was right. At some point along the way, between changing diapers and signing checks, between begging for love and pleading for attention, I had disappeared. "What do I do?" I whispered to her. "How do I live knowing that my own son sees me like this?" Laura looked me straight in the eyes. "You respect yourself. That's what you do. You show them that you are not a resource. You are a person. And if they don't understand that, let them learn to live without you." That night, when Laura left, I sat in my dining room with an old notebook and a pen. I started writing. Numbers, dates, amounts, apartment, $2,800,000. Business, $750,000. Wedding, $450,000. Monthly allowances for 10 years, $4,200,000. Grandchildren's expenses, gifts, emergencies, approximately $550,000 more. Total, $8,750,000, almost $9 million in a decade. I closed the notebook. I turned off the light. And in the darkness of my house, I made a decision. I wasn't going to confront them. I wasn't going to beg them for love or respect. I wasn't going to explain how much they had hurt me. I was going to do something much more powerful. I was going to disappear. And when they wanted to find me, when they needed something, when they opened their bank accounts and saw that the money was no longer flowing, then, only then, would they understand what they had lost. On Monday at 9 a.m., I entered the bank with my back straighter than ever. I was wearing my best suit, that pearl gray one that Robert gave me on our 20th anniversary. I put on makeup, fixed my hair, put on my pearl earrings. I needed to look like what I was, a woman with the power of decision, not a victim. "Good morning, Mrs. Opal," greeted Richard, the executive who had managed my accounts for years. "How can I help you?" "I need to cancel some additional credit cards," I said with a calm that surprised myself. Richard checked his computer. "The cards in your son Scott's name, correct? They have a limit of $180,000. "Those same ones. Cancel them." There was an uncomfortable silence. Richard looked at me with genuine concern. "Mrs. Opal, are you sure? These cards have been active for 8 years. Did something happen?" "Nothing that concerns you, Richard. Just do what I ask." He typed on his computer nervously. "Done. The cards will be inactive in 1 hour. Anything else?" "Yes, I want to withdraw $400,000 in cash." Now he was alarmed. "Ma'am, that's a considerable amount. Don't you prefer a transfer? It's safer." "In cash, Richard." He made me sign papers, asked for additional identification, warned me about the risks of handling so much physical money. I just nodded, waiting. 40 minutes later, I left the bank with a manila envelope full of bills in my purse. The second stop was with the same executive. 30 minutes later. "I also want to cancel the automatic monthly transfer." "The $35,000 that is deposited into your son's account every 5th of the month." "That one." Richard didn't ask any more questions. I think he understood that something serious had happened. Do you wish to keep your investments and the rest of your accounts intact? Of course. Just cancel anything that has to do with Scott. When I left the bank, I felt something strange in my chest. It wasn't relief. It wasn't satisfaction. It was freedom, like taking off a shoe that has been pinching you for so long that you forgot what it felt like to walk without pain. But I wasn't finished. I went straight to the office of Attorney Miller, the trusted lawyer who handled Robert's will, a man of 70 years old, serious, a man of few words. I need to update my will, I told him bluntly. He looked at me over his glasses. Any problem, Opal? Let's say I've gained clarity. We spent 2 hours reviewing documents. The apartment was in Scott's name. There was nothing to be done there. But my house, my savings, my investments, everything else, I could control that. I want to leave very specific instructions, I told him. If something happens to me, my house does not go to Scott. It goes to a foundation that supports elderly women in situations of abandonment. Attorney Miller raised an eyebrow. That's unusual. It's fair. And your savings? The same. Scott has already received his inheritance in life, more than most children ever receive. I signed the documents with a steady hand. The lawyer prepared a sealed copy that I stored in a bank safety deposit box. Another copy remained in his office with clear instructions. If Scott asked about me, he could give him the letter I was leaving. The letter simply said, "Son, if you are reading this, it's because you are looking for me. I hope it's because you care, not because you need something. I left to seek the peace I couldn't find in my own family. Don't look for me. When I am ready, I will look for you. Your mother, Opal." I left the office feeling like I had closed a chapter, but the most important thing remained. I returned to my house and started packing, not the cruise suitcases. I left those open on the bed as evidence of a life that no longer served me. I packed another suitcase, comfortable clothes, flat shoes, photos of Robert, my grandmother's recipe book, my important documents. I called Laura. "Can you look after my house?" "What are you going to do, Opal?" "Something I should have done years ago. I'm going to disappear." "Where will you go?" "Do you remember Seaside Haven, the town where Robert and I used to vacation?" "Oh, Opal, you haven't been there in years." "Exactly. Nobody will look for me there. Nobody knows I still have contacts in that place." Laura was silent for a moment. Then she said, "When are you leaving?" "Tomorrow, before they realize the cards don't work, before Scott gets on that boat and completely forgets about me. And if they look for you, let them look. You don't know anything. Just tell them I went on a trip and will be back when I feel like it." That night, I packed the final details. I disconnected the landline phone. I put my cell phone in a plastic bag, ready to turn it off. I left the house spotless, as if I were coming back tomorrow. But I wasn't coming back soon. In the early hours of Tuesday, before dawn, I put my 2 suitcases in the car. I looked at my house for the last time from the SUV. That house where I was a wife, mother, grandmother, where I was happy and then forgotten. I locked the door, started the engine, and disappeared. Scott, Jane, and the children boarded their cruise that Thursday. They took photos smiling on the deck, toasted with champagne that I paid for, enjoyed dinners that I financed. But when Scott tried to pay for premium drinks, when he wanted to reserve the spa for Jane, when they tried to charge for the excursions in Cozumel, all the cards were declined, one after another. Insufficient funds. And meanwhile, I was 300 miles away, feeling the sea wind on my face and remembering, for the first time in years, who I was before I became the bank for my own family. I wasn't there to see it, but I imagined it perfectly. Scott on the ship's deck, with his white linen shirt and those expensive sunglasses I gave him for his birthday. Jane next to him, in a beach dress that probably cost more than I spent on clothes in a year. The children running around, excited. Jane's family taking photos, happy, celebrating. Celebrating a trip I paid for to a cruise I wasn't invited to. I imagined it all, and strangely, it no longer hurt. I only felt a cold calm, like when you see storm clouds in the distance and you know they won't get you wet because you are indoors. According to Laura later told me, it all started on the first day on the ship. Scott wanted to order a bottle of wine at dinner. $800 worth of wine. Nothing out of the ordinary for someone used to their mother paying for everything. He handed the card to the waiter. "Declined, sir." "Impossible. Try again." The waiter tried 3 times. Same screen, same word. Declined. "It must be a system error," Scott said, sweating. He took out the other card, the backup one. "Try this one." Same result. Jane looked at him from the other side of the table with those eyes he knew well. The eyes that said, "Are you serious? Are you going to make me look bad in front of my family?" "Excuse me," Scott said, standing up. "I'm going to call the bank. It's probably a security problem because we're abroad." But it wasn't a security problem. He called the bank from his cabin. The automatic recording informed him. "The cards ending in 4829 and 5561 have been canceled at the request of the primary cardholder." Scott dialed my number. Once, twice, 10 times, voicemail. "Mom, call me. There's a problem with the cards. You must have canceled something by mistake. Please call me urgently." I was in Seaside Haven, with the phone off, walking barefoot on the beach and feeling the sand between my toes. Free. On the second day of the cruise, Jane wanted to book a spa treatment. Hot stone massage, facial, manicure, the whole $2,500 package. "I'm sorry, ma'am, we need a valid payment method." "My husband has ship cards." "Yes, but for premium services, we need an additional charge, and the cards you registered are not working." Jane had to cancel, in front of her mother and sisters, who already had their appointments confirmed. The humiliation in her eyes must have been delicious. On the third day, the excursions in Cozumel, everyone got off the ship excited. Jane's family hired a private snorkeling tour, $4,000 per person. Scott tried to join. "How will you be paying, sir?" "Credit card." You already know the result. Jane's family left on the private boat. Scott, Jane, and the children stayed on the pier, watching them go away. Matthew asked, "Dad, why don't we go?" He had no answer. They ended up taking a group tour for $50 per person, sharing a boat with 30 other tourists. Jane didn't speak the whole way. She just stared at the horizon with her jaw tense. That night, in the cabin, she exploded. "What did you do to your mother? Why did she cancel the cards?" "I don't know, Jane. She won't answer. Neither calls nor messages. It's like she disappeared." "Well, you're going to have to fix it. You're making me look ridiculous in front of my family. Do you know how many times my sister has commented that we can't pay for anything? How many pitying looks have I received? And what do you want me to do? I don't know where she is." "Find her. She's your mother, for goodness sake. How can she just disappear like that?" Scott tried to call Laura. She answered with a calm, almost bored voice. "Opal?" "Ah, yes. She told me she was going on a trip. She didn't say where. She said she needed time for herself." "Time for herself? Seriously? Right now?" "Scott, your mom is 68 years old and has never done anything for herself. I think she deserves it, don't you think?" "Did she say when she's coming back?" "No. And frankly, I wouldn't be surprised if she takes all the time in the world." She hung up. The rest of the cruise was a silent disaster. Scott and Jane ate at the basic buffet, while the rest of the family went to the specialty restaurants. They drank water while the others ordered cocktails. They stayed on the ship while the others went shopping in the ports. And every time Jane's parents asked, "Are you sure you don't want to come? Don't you have the budget?" And the humiliation grew. The last day, when the ship returned to port, Scott had deep, dark circles under his eyes. Jane hadn't spoken to him in 2 days. The children were confused, sensing the tension, but not understanding it. As they disembarked, Jane whispered venomously, "Your mother did this to us on purpose, and when you find her, you're going to have to choose, Scott. Either her or me, because I won't continue living like this." Scott nodded, defeated. In his mind, I was the villain, the selfish mother who had abandoned them at the worst time. They still didn't understand anything. Because while they were getting off that humiliated and confused ship, I was in Seaside Haven, drinking coffee on the porch of a little house facing the sea, watching the sunrise, and feeling something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. And it was just beginning. Because what they would find when they got home, what they would discover in the coming days, that really was going to change everything. Seaside Haven hadn't changed in 10 years. The same cobblestone streets, the same houses with colors faded by the sun, the same smell of salt and freshly made waffles coming from the diners at dawn. Robert and I came here every summer when Scott was a child, before money became the only thing that united us. I rented a small house 2 blocks from the beach, $500 a night. Nothing luxurious. 2 bedrooms, a kitchen with a gas stove, a porch with a wicker rocking chair. But it had something my city house had lost years ago. Silence. The first few days I just walked. Along the beach, along the boardwalk, through the little market where women sold fresh fish and mangoes so sweet that the juice ran down your elbows. Nobody knew me. Nobody asked me for anything. Nobody expected me to be anyone other than an elderly woman enjoying the sea. I was invisible. And for the first time in my life, that felt like a gift. One morning I found a bookstore on the corner of the main square. It was old, with a faded wooden sign that said, Sea Books. The windows were full of used novels, some with pages yellowed by the sea salt. I went in more out of curiosity than anything else. Inside it smelled of old paper and coffee. The bookshelves reached the ceiling, so full that the books seemed to be holding each other up, and behind the counter, an elderly man was reading with thick glasses and a steaming cup in his hand. He looked up when the light came through the door. "Good morning. Come in. Make yourself at home." He was 72 years old, I learned later. White hair, deep wrinkles around his eyes, large hands full of small scars, hands that told stories. I stood looking at the books without really seeing them. He continued reading, without pressuring me to buy anything. That comfortable silence was something I hadn't experienced since Robert died. "Looking for anything in particular?" he finally asked. "I don't know," I replied honestly. "I think I'm just looking to be somewhere where nobody knows me." He nodded as if that were the most normal thing in the world. "This is a good place for that. I've been here for 15 years, and there are still days when people forget my name." He made me laugh. A small, rusty, but real laugh. "I'm Alan," he said, extending a hand over the counter. "Opal." "First time in Seaside Haven, Opal." "No, I used to come many years ago. With my husband? And now you travel alone?" I hesitated, but there was something in his eyes, something warm and non-judgmental that made me want to talk. "Now I travel because I needed to get away from my family." Alan wasn't surprised. He just pointed to a chair next to the counter. "Sit down. I just made coffee. And if you want to talk, I know how to listen. If you don't, that's fine too. But nobody should drink coffee alone." And so it began. I sat in that rickety chair with a cup of drip coffee in my hands and started talking. Slowly at first, like someone testing the water with a finger before diving in. Then faster, like a river finding a crack in the dam and unable to stop. I told him everything. Jane's message, the conversation I overheard, the millions of dollars invested in a son who saw me as an ATM, the canceled cards, the disappearance. Alan didn't interrupt once. He just drank his coffee, nodded, and looked at me with those eyes that had seen a lot of the world. When I finished, there were tears on my cheeks. I hadn't even realized I was crying. "Sorry," I said, wiping my face with embarrassment. "I don't know why I'm telling you all this. You don't know me." "Precisely because of that," he replied softly. "Sometimes it's easier to talk to a stranger than to someone who thinks they know you." He was silent for a moment, looking at his empty cup. Then he said something I will never forget. "You know, Opal, my wife died 15 years ago. Cancer. When she was gone, my 3 children fought over the inheritance before the grave even cooled. They wanted the house, the savings, even the furniture. None of them asked how I was. None of them invited me to live with them. They just wanted what was theirs." I remained silent. "Do you know what I did?" he continued. "I came here. I sold everything. I bought this bookstore and told my children that when they learned to see me as a father and not as an inheritance, they could look for me." "And did they?" He smiled sadly. "One did, after 5 years. He arrived with tears in his eyes, asking for forgiveness. The other 2 are still waiting for me to die to see what's left. Doesn't it hurt? Every day. But do you know what hurts more? The years I wasted begging for their love, justifying their selfishness, confusing my obligation to give them with their obligation to love me. He looked me straight in the eyes. The love that is begged for is worthless, Opal. Your son needs to learn that you are a blessing, not an obligation. And if he never learns it, at least you will live with dignity. Those words hit me like a wave. Blessing, not obligation. When had I stopped feeling like a blessing to my family and started feeling like a burden that was only useful when it brought money? I left that bookstore with swollen eyes, but with something new in my chest. It wasn't happiness yet. It was more like hope. The possibility that maybe, just maybe, my life hadn't ended when Robert died. That maybe there was still something left of me that was worth rescuing. I went back to the bookstore the next day, and the next, and the next. Alan and I talked about everything. About books, about life, about the sea. He told me about his wife, how they met dancing at a town fair. I told him about Robert, how I fell in love with a man who made me feel that the world was bigger and brighter just by being by his side. "Do you know what I miss the most?" I told him one afternoon as we watched the sunset from the bookstore's porch. "I miss feeling important, not for what I can give, but for who I am." Alan smiled. "Opal, you are important. You were just looking for that validation in the wrong people." 2 weeks passed, then 3. My phone was still off. I didn't know what was happening in the city. I didn't want to know. Every morning I walked along the beach. Every afternoon I visited Alan at the bookstore. At night I sat on the porch of my little house, listening to the waves, and wrote in an old notebook. I wrote everything I had kept silent for years. The rage, the pain, the disappointment. But I also wrote about the sea, about the drip coffee, about the conversations with a wise old man who was teaching me to see myself with different eyes. And slowly, very slowly, something inside me began to heal. But peace doesn't last forever. Because one afternoon, while I was helping Alan organize books in the back room, Laura finally managed to track down the phone of the only hotel in town. "Opal, I found you, and I need you to know something. Scott is desperate. He's been to your house every day. The business is in trouble. Jane is driving him crazy. And now he's coming there." Laura told him where you are. My blood ran cold. "When is he arriving?" "Tomorrow." I hung up the phone with trembling hands. Alan looked at me from across the counter. "The storm has arrived?" I nodded. "Then get ready, Opal, because this is going to be the most important conversation of your life." Scott arrived at Seaside Haven the next afternoon. I saw him from the bookstore window. His gray pickup truck, the one I helped him buy 3 years ago, was kicking up dust on the dirt road. He was alone, without Jane, without the children. He parked in front of the square and got out with clumsy movements, as if he hadn't slept in days. He was wearing the same wrinkled clothes, several days' beard, dark circles so deep they looked like bruises. He looked broken. And for a second, just 1 second, my mother's heart wanted to run out and hug him, to tell him that everything would be okay, to fix whatever was broken in his life. But then I remembered the message, the conversation, the 10 years of slights disguised as love, and I stayed still. Alan put his hand on my shoulder. "Do you want me to stay with you?" "No, I have to do this alone." I left the bookstore before Scott could see me there. I walked towards the little house I was renting, knowing that he would ask and someone would tell him where I was. This town was small. Secrets didn't last long. I sat on the porch, in the wicker rocking chair, and waited. It took him 20 minutes to find me. When he appeared around the corner, sweating from the heat and desperation, our eyes met, and I saw something in his eyes that I didn't expect to see. Fear. "Mom," he said with a broken voice. "Mom, I finally found you." I didn't answer. I just looked at him, waiting. He approached the porch, climbed the steps as if his feet were heavy, and dropped to the ground in front of me. He literally knelt there on those old wooden planks and started to cry. "Forgive me, please, forgive me." He cried like a child, with sobs that shook his whole body. And I stayed there, rocking my chair slowly, without saying anything, because there were words that needed to come out of him before I could say mine. "I don't know what happened," he said through tears. One day we were on the cruise and suddenly everything collapsed. The cards weren't working. You wouldn't answer. When we returned, the monthly payments didn't arrive. The bank told me you canceled everything, and you just disappeared." I remained silent. "The business has debts, Mom. $85,000 that I can't pay. The suppliers call me every day. I had to sell the pickup truck. I got $680,000, but it all went to settling the most urgent things. Now we drive around in an old car that barely works." Well, that did surprise me. The pickup truck he bragged about so much, sold. Jane is furious. She says this is my fault, that I should have taken better care of you, maintained the relationship. Her family humiliated her the whole cruise, and when we got back, when they found out we didn't have money, they started treating us differently, colder, more distant. How ironic! Now he was experiencing what I had lived for years. The children ask about you. Matthew asks why Grandma doesn't come to see them anymore. Camille drew a broken heart and asked me if she did something wrong. That did hurt me. The children were not to blame. Scott looked up with red, swollen eyes. "Why, Mom? Why did you leave like that? Why did you punish us this way?" And that's when I finally spoke. "Punish you." My voice came out colder than I expected. "Scott, I didn't punish you. I just stopped being your ATM." He remained silent, but there was confusion on his face, as if he really didn't understand. I took an envelope out of my purse, the envelope I had prepared with Attorney Miller, the breakdown of every dollar invested in him over 10 years. "Read it," I told him. He opened it with trembling hands. I watched as his eyes scanned the figures: apartment, business, wedding, monthly payments, grandchildren's expenses, gift after gift after gift. $8,750,000, I said when he finished reading. "That's what I invested in you in 10 years, Scott. Almost $9 million. Mom, I didn't know it was that much." "No? Of course you didn't know, because you never asked. You never cared where the money came from, only that it kept coming." "That's not true. I love you, Mom." "You love me? Really?" I leaned forward in the rocking chair. "Do you know how many times you called me last year? 12. 12 times in 365 days, and out of those 12, 10 were to ask me for money or a favor." He was speechless. "Do you know what I overheard 3 days before that message was sent to me, Scott?" He looked at me with genuine fear. "I went to your apartment to bring you turkey and gravy. You were in the bedroom. Jane was talking on the phone with her mother, and I heard her say quite clearly that she was almost rid of the old lady, that I wasn't going on the cruise because I wasn't part of the closest ones, that they had already gotten everything they could from me, and that if I disappeared tomorrow, I had already served my purpose." Scott turned pale. "And do you know what was the worst part, son? That you never defended me. That when that message arrived excluding me from the trip I paid for, you didn't even have the courage to call me. You sent me a text message, as if I were a secretary whose appointment you were canceling." "Mom, you turned me into your ATM, Scott. You took away the only thing I had left after losing your father, my dignity." Tears streamed down his face, but I couldn't stop anymore. 10 years of silence poured out of my mouth like a torrent. "Do you have any idea how many nights I cried alone in that house? How many times I prepared food to take to you and Jane left it in the refrigerator without tasting it? How many times your children called me on the phone only because you forced them to? I'm sorry. I really am sorry. Do you know what a friend told me a few weeks ago?" I continued. "He told me that the love that is begged for is worthless, and he was right. I spent 10 years begging for your love, justifying your selfishness, confusing my obligation to give you with your obligation to love me." Scott was sobbing on the porch floor, completely broken. "I loved you with everything I had," I told him with a now broken voice. "I gave you everything, my time, my money, my peace, and you gave me crumbs, 5-minute calls, obligatory visits, grandchildren who see me as a stranger because you never taught them to value me." "What do you want me to do?" he asked through sobs. "Tell me what to do, Mom. I'll do anything." I remained silent for a long moment, looking at that 40-year-old man kneeling on my porch, pleading. He looked like a lost child, and a part of me wanted to fix everything, go back to being the mother I always was. But the other part, the part that had grown in these weeks by the sea, the part that learned to value herself, that part said, I don't want you to do anything for me, Scott. I want you to do it for you. Because if you don't learn now, if you don't understand what you did wrong, you're going to repeat this with your children. And one day, Matthew or Camille will see you the same way you saw me, as a resource, not as a person. I don't see you like that. Yes, you do. Maybe not consciously, but when you only call me when you need something, when you justify every slight from your wife, when you exclude me from a trip that I paid for, yes, you see me like that. I got up from the rocking chair. He was still kneeling. I'm going back to the city, I told him, but not to your life, not yet. First, I need you to prove something to me. What? That you can live without my money, that you can support your family with your own means, that you can teach your children that their grandmother is a person who deserves respect, not a wallet with legs. And if I do it, if I change, then maybe, just maybe, we can rebuild something. But it will be something different, because I am no longer the mother who puts up with everything. Now I am the woman who only accepts what she deserves. I left him there, on the porch, crying as I had never seen him cry. I went into the little house, closed the door, and leaned against it, trembling. It had been the hardest conversation of my life, but also the most necessary. Scott stayed in Seaside Haven 2 more days, not at my little house. I told him that if he wanted to talk to me, we would meet in public places. I was no longer going to allow him to invade my space, my peace, my little refuge by the sea. We met in the square, on the boardwalk, at Mrs. Reed's diner. Short, uncomfortable conversations, full of heavy silences that neither of us knew how to fill. He told me things that I already knew, but that hurt more coming from his mouth. The business was on the verge of closing. Without the monthly payments I deposited, it wasn't enough to cover expenses. He had had to fire 2 employees. Suppliers threatened to sue him. Jane blamed him for everything. You ruined the relationship with your mother. You let her leave. You got us into this mess. They argued every night. In front of the children, the yelling had become part of the routine. Jane's family had begun to distance themselves. They no longer invited them to gatherings. They no longer answered calls with the same warmth. Because without money, without the appearance of success, Scott and his family were no longer interesting. I feel lonely, Mom, he told me one afternoon as we watched the sunset from the boardwalk. Jane looks at me as if I were a failure. The children feel the tension, but they don't understand what's happening. And I don't know how to fix this. I wanted to tell him that money doesn't fix everything, that he was learning that lesson the hard way. But I remained silent, because there were lessons he needed to discover alone. On the 3rd day, when he was about to leave, he looked for me at the bookstore. Alan was with me, organizing books on a shelf. When Scott came in, Alan looked at me as if asking if he should leave. I shook my head. I needed witnesses to this conversation. I needed someone else to hear what was going to happen. Mom, Scott said, with a voice firmer than in previous days, I need to ask you something. Tell me. I need you to come back, to come home, to go back to how we were before. There was a long silence, so long that I heard the wall clock ticking the seconds. How we were before, I repeated slowly. Do you mean when I gave everything, and you took without even saying thank you? When you only called me when you needed something? When you excluded me from trips that I paid for? No, Mom, I mean when we were a family. Scott, I said, and my voice sounded tired. We were never a family. I was the bank, and you were the clients. That's not fair. It's not fair? I felt the rage I had been controlling for days start to rise. Do you know what's not fair? Investing almost $9 million in a son who can't call you once a week just to ask how you are. That's not fair. Scott lowered his gaze. I'm going to ask you a question, I continued, and I want you to be completely honest. When was the last time you asked me how I was? Not my health, not my money, me, my feelings, my dreams, my loneliness. He was silent, thinking, searching his memory. Searching. He found nothing. "You don't remember, do you?" My voice broke. "Why did you never ask? In 10 years, Scott, 10 years since your father died, and I was left alone in that huge house. You never asked me if I felt lonely, if I missed someone, if I needed company that I didn't have to buy with checks. Mom, let me finish." I raised a hand. "When your father died, you told me I would never be alone. Do you remember? 3 days after the funeral. You promised me, and I believed you. But I was alone, son, terribly alone, in that house that felt too big, too silent, too empty. And I thought that if I kept giving, if I kept being useful, maybe the days wouldn't feel so empty. Maybe you would call me more often. Maybe you would truly love me." Scott was crying now, too. "But love doesn't work that way. It's not bought with apartments or monthly payments. It's not begged for with gifts or checks. It is given freely, or it is worthless." "I'm sorry, Mom. I really am sorry. I know. But feeling it is not enough. You need to understand what you did wrong. You need to learn that I am a person, not a solution to your problems." I wiped the tears with the back of my hand. "Do you know what I've discovered in these weeks here? I've discovered that I can be happy without you, that I can wake up in the mornings without worrying about whether you will call or not, that I can walk on the beach and feel peace instead of anguish, that I can have real conversations with people I barely know because they see me as Opal, not as the mother-in-law with money." Alan, who had been silent all this time, nodded from his place on the shelf. "So, what do you want from me?" Scott asked with a broken voice. "What do I have to do?" "I want you to learn to live without my money. I want you to save your business with your own effort. I want you to teach your children that their grandmother is a person who deserves love, not a machine that spits out bills. And if I can't, if I fail, then you will fail, and you will learn, because that's how you grow, Scott, by falling and getting up, not by expecting someone else to always hold you up." I took an envelope out of my purse. Another envelope, this one thicker. "This," I said, handing it to him, "is a notarized document. It is the complete breakdown of everything I invested in you, every dollar, every date, every purpose." He opened it with trembling hands, page after page of numbers, receipts, transfers. "I'm not giving it to you to collect it," I clarified. "I'm giving it to you so you can see it, so you can understand the magnitude of what you received, and so that one day, when Matthew or Camille ask you for something, you remember this, and don't make the same mistakes I made with you." "What mistakes?" "Giving you everything without teaching you to value it, solving all your problems without letting you learn, loving you so much that I forgot to teach you to love back." Scott hugged the envelope against his chest, crying. "I'm going to change, Mom. I swear it. I'm going to be better. Don't swear it to me," I told him softly. "Swear it to yourself and to your children, because they are the ones who are going to live with the man you become." He stayed there, standing in the middle of the bookstore, holding that envelope as if it were the heaviest thing in the world. And maybe it was, because the weight of guilt, the weight of understanding how much harm you did without realizing it, that weight is not measured in pounds. It's measured in sleepless nights and in looks in the mirror that show you a stranger. "Are you coming back?" he finally asked. "Yes, but not yet. And when I come back, I won't go to your house. I'll go to mine, and you will come only when I invite you, and only if you learn to treat me as what I am, your mother, not your solution." He nodded, defeated. "Can I hug you?" I hesitated, but in the end, I nodded. He approached slowly, as if he was afraid I would disappear. He hugged me desperately, with that childish crying of someone who realizes they broke something they don't know if they can fix. "I love you, Mom," he whispered against my shoulder. "I love you too, son. That's why I'm doing this, because true love is not allowing yourself to be used. It's teaching you to be better." He left that afternoon. I watched him get into his old car and drive away on the dirt road, kicking up dust that shone golden in the light of the sunset. When he disappeared from view, Alan approached and put a hand on my shoulder. "You did the right thing, Opal." "Then why does it hurt so much?" Because love always hurts when it has to choose between the heart and dignity. But you chose well. I stood there, at the door of the bookstore, watching the empty road. And for the first time in 10 years, I felt that I was finally setting the boundaries I should have set a long time ago. But this was just beginning. Because when I returned to the city weeks later, what I found, that really changed everything forever. I returned to the city 6 weeks later. I didn't announce it. I didn't call. One day I simply woke up in Seaside Haven. I looked at the sea and knew it was time to go back. Not because I missed them, but because I was finally ready to face my life with the strength I had found by the waves. Alan said goodbye to me in the square, with a long hug and a book wrapped in brown paper. "For the road," he told me, "and so you remember that you will always have a friend here." "Will I see you again?" "If you want to, but no longer as the woman who ran away, but as the woman who chose to stay with herself." I drove the 5 hours back with the windows open, letting the wind mess up my hair, feeling more alive than ever. When I arrived at my house, Laura was waiting for me on the porch, with a huge smile and tears in her eyes. "Oh, Opal, I thought you wouldn't come back." "I thought so too." She hugged me tightly, and we went inside that house that I had left empty weeks ago. It smelled stuffy, dusty, abandoned, but it also smelled like home. "I have to tell you everything that happened while you were gone," Laura said as she prepared coffee. And a lot had happened. Scott had returned devastated. Jane received him with fury, with complaints, with threats of divorce. "Your mother abandoned us because of you," she shouted day and night. But something had changed in Scott. For the first time in 15 years, he stopped her. "No," he told her. "My mother didn't abandon us. She took away what we didn't deserve. And she's right." Jane was speechless. "You showed her your true face," Scott continued, with a firmness he had never had. "You treated her like garbage, and I allowed it, but that's over." That conversation ended in a brutal fight. Jane threatened to leave. Scott told her that if the only thing keeping her there was his mother's money, then she better leave. She didn't leave. But something broke between them, something that might never be fixed. The business continued to falter. Without the monthly payments, without the financial cushion I provided, Scott had to learn to truly manage. He cut expenses, negotiated with suppliers. He worked 12 hours a day, and slowly, very slowly, it began to stabilize. It wasn't profitable yet, but it was alive. "And the children?" I asked. Laura smiled. "That's the good part. Scott talked to them," he explained, in children's words that he had treated their grandmother badly, that you were not a machine to give things, but a person who deserved love. "Did he really do that? Really?" Matthew cried. "He said he missed your bedtime stories." Camille drew a heart and wrote "For Grandma Opal" with crooked letters. I felt my eyes fill with tears. "Scott comes here every week," Laura continued. "He knocks on the door. He sits on your porch and waits, even though you're not here. He just waits, as if telling you that he's not going to give up." I didn't say anything. I didn't know what to say. I spent a week organizing my house, cleaning, tidying, re-inhabiting the spaces I had abandoned. And every afternoon I looked out the window, waiting. I didn't know what. On Saturday, while watering the garden plants, I heard the gate. It was Scott, but he wasn't alone. Matthew and Camille were running ahead of him, with drawings in their hands and nervous smiles on their faces. "Grandma!" Matthew shouted, and ran towards me. I knelt down just in time to receive them. I hugged them tightly, feeling their warm little bodies, their laughter, their smell of children's shampoo. "We missed you," Camille whispered against my neck. "Dad told us we were bad to you." "You weren't bad, my love. You are children. We adults were the ones who made mistakes." Scott stood in the garden, with his hands in his pockets, looking at me with different eyes, eyes that finally saw me. "Hello, Mom." "Hello, son. Can we talk?" I nodded. The children ran off to play in the garden, while Scott and I sat in the same chairs where we had so often shared coffee and lies disguised as family. "I sold the pickup truck," he said immediately. I got $680,000. I paid all the business debts. I also sold the gym equipment I had at home, the big TV in the living room, some things we didn't need. Now we live with the basics. And how does that feel? Crushing, but also liberating. For the first time in years, I don't owe anything. Well, except you, but that's not paid with money. No, I agreed. That's not paid with money. She's changing. Or maybe she's just accepting that things are different. She no longer complains about the money. Now she complains because I'm never home, because I work too much, because we're stressed. They are normal complaints, I think. Marriage complaints, not business partner complaints. And how are you? He was silent for a long moment. Tired, scared, but also proud. For the first time in my life, I'm building something with my own hands. Without your money, without shortcuts. And it hurts, Mom. It hurts a lot, but it's mine. I smiled. It was a sad but real smile. That's all I wanted, son. For you to learn to stand on your own. The children ask about you every day. Matthew wants you to teach him to make cookies like you used to make with him when he was little. Camille wants you to read her bedtime stories. And you? What do you want? He looked me straight in the eyes. I want my mom back. Not my bank. My mom. The woman who taught me to ride a bike. The one who treated my scraped knees. The one who hugged me when I had nightmares. That mom. Tears streamed down my cheeks. Streamed down. That mom never left, Scott. She was just hidden under all the bills and checks. But I needed you to look for her. Not her money. I'm sorry. For everything. For the 10 lost years. For not seeing you. For using your love as if it were infinite and indestructible. A mother's love is infinite, I told him softly. But it is not indestructible. And you almost broke it, son. Almost? Almost. But I'm here. Hurt, tired, different. But I'm here. Scott knelt in front of me, as he had done in Seaside Haven. Can we start over? Not as before, but as something new, something healthier, something real. We can try, I finally said, but with rules, whatever they are. You come when I invite you, not when you need something. You call me at least once a week, just to talk. No money, no favors, just to ask how I am. And the children? The grandchildren visit me because they want to, not because you force them to. Done. And if Jane treats me the way she did again, if she talks about me the way she did that time, it won't happen, he interrupted me. I already talked to her. I made it clear to her that if she can't respect my mother, then we will have serious problems. I nodded. I didn't completely trust her yet, but it was a start. The following months were strange, like learning to walk after an accident. Clumsy, painful, but necessary. Scott called every Wednesday and Sunday, just to talk. He told me about the business, about the children, about the small victories and the big defeats. And I told him about my garden, about my walks, about my new friends at the book club I had found. The grandchildren came on Saturdays, not every Saturday, but enough. And when they came, it was different. They hugged me genuinely. They told me their things. They asked for stories, recipes, time. Not gifts, time. Jane. Jane remained distant, but politely distant. There was no longer contempt in her eyes. Maybe fear. Fear that I would disappear again and her marriage wouldn't survive. 6 months after my return, Scott knocked on my door on a Tuesday afternoon. He was carrying an envelope. "What is this?" I asked, taking it. "Open it." Inside there was a check for $50,000. "It's the first payment," he said with a trembling voice. "I know it's not much. I know it doesn't even cover 1% of what I owe you, but it's mine. I earned it with my work, and I want to start giving you back, not the money, but the dignity, to show you that I can be the son you deserve." I stared at that check with tears in my eyes. "I don't want it," I finally said. "What?" I tore the check into pieces. "I don't want your money, Scott. I never wanted the money back. What I wanted was respect, love, time, and that you are already giving me." He cried, And I cried with him. Because finally, after so much pain, so much silence, so much distance, we were learning to be a real family. A year later, I received a call from Alan. "Opal, I have a proposal for you. Tell me. The bookstore is growing. I need help." And I thought, would you like to be my partner? I was silent, feeling my heart accelerate. "You don't have to decide now," he continued. "But think about it. Seaside Haven misses you. I miss you." I hung up the phone with a smile. I talked to Scott that night. I told him about the proposal. "Would you leave again?" he asked with fear in his voice. "I wouldn't leave. I would split my time. A few months here, a few months there, living my life, but without forgetting about you. And if we need you, you will have me. But you will also have to learn that I deserve to live too, that I don't just exist for you." He nodded, understanding. 2 months later, I became a partner in the Seabooks bookstore. I invested $300,000 of my savings. Not millions, not everything I had, just what was fair. Now I spend 6 months in the city and 6 months in Seaside Haven. Scott and the children visit me in the town when they can. We walk on the beach, we eat fresh fish, we talk about life. Jane came once. She was silent most of the time, but before leaving, she said something I never expected. "Thank you for not giving up on us, even though we deserved it." I didn't answer. I just nodded, because there were things that didn't need words. Today, as I write this sitting on the porch of my little house by the sea, with a cup of drip coffee in my hands and the sound of the waves in the background, I think about everything that happened. I think about the woman I was 2 years ago, the woman who begged for love with checks, who confused being needed with being loved, who had lost herself trying to be everything to everyone. And I think about the woman I am now, the one who learned that true love cannot be bought, that family is built with respect, not with money, that sometimes disappearing is the only way for them to truly see you. My son is not perfect. He probably never will be. But he is trying. And that, after everything we went through, is enough. My grandchildren call me Grandma Opal, with affection now, not with distance, with real love. And I finally learned something I should have learned a long time ago. The love that is begged for is worthless. The respect that is pleaded for is a lie. And the family that only seeks you out when they need something is not family. But the family that learns from its mistakes, that falls and gets up, that hurts but also heals, that family is worthwhile. And most importantly of all, I learned that I am also worthwhile, with money or without it, with family or without it, alone or accompanied. Because true wealth is not in what you possess, it is in what you don't allow them to take from you. And I recovered my dignity, and that is priceless.